The previous chapter stated that one of the major reasons behind the passage of the Rizal Law was the strong intent to instill nationalism in the hearts and minds of the Filipino youth. This chapter will now focus on nation and nationalism in the Philippine context. It will explain the concepts of nation, state, and the nation state as a precursor to understanding nationalism and the projects that lead to it. Likewise, the discussion will touch on some of Rizal's work that deals with nation and nationalism. The chapter also aims to reflect on nation building in the Philippines, which is a major force behind the passage of the Rizal Law. So, good day to you, my dear students. So, welcome to the chapter 2 on nation and nationalism for the Rizal class. So, our specific objectives at the end of this chapter: the student should be able to define nationalism in relation to the concepts of nation, state, and nation state. The second one is to appraise the development of nationalism in the country. And lastly, to explain the relevance of nationalism and nation building at present. Okay, for the vocabulary, so when we say bayan or banwa, it refers to indigenous Filipino concepts of community and territory that may be related to nationalism. Another one here is the nation. It's a group of people with shared language, culture, and history. Nation building is a project undertaken with the goal of strengthening the bond of the nation. Nation state is a state ruling over a nation. Patriotism is a feeling attachment to one's homeland. And lastly, sovereignty is the authority to govern a polity without external interference or incursions. Okay, nation state and nation state. Social scientists have fleshed out the nuance of the nation state and nation state. A nation is a community of people that believe to share a link with one another based on the cultural practices, language, religion, or belief system and historical experience, to name a few. A state, on the other hand, is a political entity that has sovereignty over a defined territory. States have laws, taxation, government, and bureaucracy, basically the means of regulating life within the territory. The sovereignty needs diplomatic recognition to be legitimate and acknowledged internationally. The state's boundaries and territory are not fixed and change across time with war, sale, arbitration, and negotiation, and even assimilation or secession. A nation-state, in a way, is a fusion of the elements of the nation, which is the people or community, and the state, which is also a territory. So the development of nation-states started in Europe during the periods coinciding the Enlightenment. So the first one here is the first path, which is the classical nation-states of Europe, began with the Peace of Westphalia in the 17th century. Many paths were taken towards the formation of nation-states. In the classical nation-states, many scholars posit that the process was an evolution from being a state into a nation-state, in which the members of the bureaucracy, like the lawyers, politicians, diplomats, etc., eventually moved to unify the people within the state to build the nation-state. The second path was taken by subsequent nation-states, which were formed from nations. So in this process, Intellectuals and scholars laid the foundations of a nation and worked towards the formation of a political and eventually diplomatic recognition to create a nation state. A third path, taken by many Asian and African people, involved in breaking off from a colonial relationship, especially after World War II, when a series of decolonization and nation rebuilding occurred. During this time, the groups initially controlled by imperial powers started to assert their identity to form a nation and build their own state from the fragments of the colonial ties. Then, a fourth path was by way of sometimes violent secessions by people already part of an existing state. Here, a group of people who refused to or could not identify with the rest of the population built a nation, asserted their own identity, and demanded recognition. In the contemporary world, the existing nation states continuously strive for projects of nation building, especially since the globalization and transnational connections are progressing. Nation and nationalism. As mentioned, one major component of nation state is the nation. So this concept assumes that there is a bond that connects a group of people together to form a community. And the origin of the nation and concomitantly nationalism has been a subject of debate among the social scientists and scholars. In these sections, there are three theories about the roots of the nation will be presented. The first theory traces the root of the nation and national identity to existing and deep-rooted features of a group of people like race, language, religion, and others. It is often called primordialism. It argues that national identity has always existed, and nations have ethnic cores. In this essentialist stance, one may lead to conclude that divisions of us and them are naturally formed based on the assumption that there exists an unchanging core in everyone. The second theory states that nation and national identity and nationalism are products of the modern condition and are shaped by modernity. This line of thinking suggests that nationalism and national identity are necessary products of social structure and culture brought about by the emergence of capitalism, industrialization, secularization, urbanization, and bureaucratization. This idea further posits that in the pre-modern societies, the rigid social hierarchies could accommodate diversity in language and culture, in contrast with the present times in which rapid change pushes statehood to guard the homogeneity in society through nationalism. Thus, in the modernist explanation, nationalism is a political project. The third theory is a very influential explanation about nation and nationalism, maintains that these ideas are discursive, often referred to as constructivist approach. A constructivist approach to understanding nationalism. In this view maintains that nationalism is socially constructed and imagined by people who identify with a group. Okay, so let's go further with Benedict Anderson. So, Benedict Anderson argues that nations are imagined communities. So he traces the history of these imagined communities to the Enlightenment, when European society began challenging the supposed divinely ordained dynastic regimes of the monarchies. This idea was starkly exemplified by the Industrial Revolution and French Revolution. The nation is seen as imagined because the people who affiliate with that community have a mental imprint of the affinity which maintains solidarity. They do not necessarily need to see and know all the members of the group. With this imagined community comes a deep horizontal comradeship that maintains harmonious coexistence and even fuels the willingness of the people to fight and die for that nation. Anderson also puts forward the important role of mass media in the construction of nation during that time. Nation and bayan. In the Philippines, many argue that the fact that the project of national building is continuing struggle up to the present. Considering the country's history, historians posit that the 19th century brought a tremendous change in the lives of the Filipinos, including the actual articulations of nation and nationhood that culminated in the first anti-colonial revolution in Asia led by Andres Bonifacio and the Katipunan. Furthermore, the scholars note the important work of the propagandists like Rizal in the sustained efforts to build the nation and enact change in the Spanish colony. These themes will be discussed in the succeeding chapters as you continue to familiarize yourselves with the concepts of nation and nationalism. It would be worthwhile to look at how these ideas have been articulated in the past, as well as how scholars locate these efforts in the indigenous culture. So, many Filipino scholars who endeavored to understand indigenous local knowledge have identified concepts that relate how Filipinos understand the notions of community to an extent, nation, and nation building. The works of Virgilio Enriquez, then Prospero Covar, and Zu Salazar, among others, attempted to identify and differentiate local categories for communities in social relations. The indigenous intellectual movements like Psikolohiyang Pilipino and Bagong Kasaysayan introduced the concepts of kapwa and bayan and can be enriched discussions about nationalism in the context of the Philippines. So, kapwa is an important concept in the country's social relations. Filipino interaction is mediated by understanding one's affinity with another as described by the phrases ibang tao and di ibang tao. In the formation and strengthening of social relations, the kapwa concept supports the notion of unity and harmony in a community. From the central concept arise other notions such as pakikipagkapwa, pakikisama, and pakikipag-ugnay, as well as collective orientation of Filipino culture and psyche. So in the field of history, a major movement in the indigenization campaign is led by Bagong Kasaysayan, founded by Zu Salazar, which advances the perspective known as pantayong pananaw. Scholars in this movement are among the major researchers that nuance the notion of bayan or banwa. In understanding Filipino concepts of community, the bayan is an important indigenous concept. Bayan or banwa can be traced all the way to the Austronesian language family is loosely defined as the territory where the people live or the actual community they are identifying with. Thus, bayan or banwa encompasses both the spatial community as well as imagined community. The concept of bayan clashed with the European notion of nación during the Spanish colonialism. The proponents of pantayong pananaw, maintaining the existence of a great cultural divide that separated elite, which is nación, and the folk or masses, which is bayan, as a product of colonial experience. This issue brings the project of a nation building to a contested terrain. Throughout the Philippine history, the challenge of building the Filipino nation has persisted, impacted by colonialism, violent invasion during World War II, a dictatorship, and the perennial struggle for development. The succeeding chapters will look into the life and works of Rizal and through them try to map how historical events shape the national hero's understanding of nation and nationalism. So that's all for chapter 2 for our result class on nation and nationalism. So once again, this is Sean Xavier Alfilita. Thank you very much.